NZXT, you freaking genius. Removing the power supply shroud for additional cooling on the GPU side is brilliant. Graphics cards are getting hotter and they're getting bigger, and this intake at the bottom, it's perfect. It improves GPU temperatures, it helps to clean up the interior of the case, and normally with full towers, NZXT, I'm looking at you, they're calling this the mid tower, but it's absolutely massive, this thing. No way, Jose, NZXT, why you lie? This is a full tower, don't be confused, okay? I hate it when standard ATX hardware looks tiny and looks like there's a ton of wasted space, but somehow it works here, perhaps maybe because of the consistent spacing on the right and below the motherboard. The thing is, NZXT did not invent this layout. This is actually from a decade ago when Fantex launched its first enclosure, the N2 Primo. They had the power supply shroud in exactly this configuration on its side to clear out room for additional motherboard or additional cooling, and that's exactly what is done here with the H7 Flow. Now, there are a lot of good things about the H7 Flow. The naming scheme is not one of them. We already have the H7 Flow, the previous iteration, and this is not like a 2024 edition. This is just the H7 Flow. So, make sure that you're buying the right one because they are the same price of $129, this versus the previous one. And I'm sure the previous one will be end of life soon. So if you are aiming to get something of an original NZXT classic, then definitely don't miss out. Now, this is unmistakably an NZXT enclosure, clean lines, beautiful hard edges, consistent ventilation pattern on the exterior and on the interior. We do have a few curvature elements that snuck into the enclosure, which I don't mind at all because it helps to complement almost this industrial look. For example, we have slight curvature at the feet at the bottom here on the side that give you the perception of elevation, but also it is true elevation because there's nothing underneath here and it's pure airflow for the bottom fans. The power supply shroud curves at the front, and the same thing for the element above the motherboard that helps to almost hug the motherboard in place. And our removable cable bar is also curved, which I'm not a huge fan of. It doesn't meet with the lines above or below. So while everything on the exterior looks gorgeous and beautiful and very NZXT, it is very difficult to pick up the case because there's nothing to pick the case by at the bottom. Hello? Now, as you can see here, I've built myself a beautiful black and white system because I feel like RGB doesn't really work unless you go with all the same RGB components, and filling the entire case with just RGB fans would be a little bit useless. So I decided to do something a little bit more functional. So P28 fans, 3 at the front, 3 at the bottom for awesome GPU cooling, 1 at the rear. And you could go with an AAO at the top. It's just not something that I'm vibing with, but I am vibing with this message from our sponsor. Montech with another insane value product, the Hyperflow ARGB AIOs, available in black or white, 240 or 360 sizes, with full platform compatibility and friendly tools along the way that not only look gorgeous with pump lighting and matching blade illumination, but also performance that should satisfy with any hot silicon thanks to high-speed fans, high-density fins on the rad, a good pump, and daisy-chain fans for easy cable management, all backed by this 6-year warranty, so you don't have to worry. Check it out below. The case I have here is the airflow version with 3 120mm fans included at the front. The 2 pieces of good news is that the fans are fairly quiet, the front panel is non-restrictive at all, and number 3, I guess 3 pieces of good news, is that the whole front panel bracket is removable with just 2 thumb screws for easy installation of radiator or set of fans. That's awesome. The bad news is that the fans are kind of mediocre, and I feel like NZXT missed an opportunity here because we have such a wide enclosure and this ventilation pattern is very see-through. It would have been awesome to include large 200mm fans at the front for brute forcing that airflow like we've seen in the Fractal design, and that always performs really well. Also notice the ventilation pattern at the top spans only the fan area, while at the front it is the width of the front panel. So again, missed opportunity for larger fans. Now, I was genuinely concerned about the front fans being so close to the front panel just because it introduces turbulence and therefore noise, but these fans don't spin that fast to introduce too much turbulence, and in fact the front porosity mesh is really good with the stock fans that with the front panel on and off you almost cannot tell the difference, and actually the sound profile is better when the front panel is installed. Take a listen. Another good piece of news is that you can mount thicker fans on the outside of the frame, so closer to the side panel. So I have the P28s mounted here and T30s fit as well. NZXT did a fantastic job with all the cable cutouts below and above the motherboard. Everything is like perfectly laid out, including the cable bar that can be moved into an EATX position to allow for wider motherboards to fit. Strangely, this case does not support BTF motherboards, which for 2024 release is weird. I mean, there's so much focus on interior and exterior aesthetic. Why not go the extra mile to remove the cables altogether? Now, this bottom section will support 3 120mm fans, or you can do fans plus a radiator as long as the radiator is not wider than the fans themselves, because that cavity is the perfect opportunity for just 3 120mm fans, and that's it. Now, at first I thought this reconfiguration was awesome, you know, because it's removing that useless power supply shroud that is normally just ugly and it's not doing anything aside from hiding the power supply underneath it. And here we have additional intake for the GPU. Is wonderful. But at the same time, they've done nothing to optimize all this additional space underneath the motherboard for anything other than having those 3 fans and having some room to breathe underneath the motherboard. This would be a perfect opportunity to introduce a vertical GPU and move it below the motherboard, but that's not an option. So aside from hiding the power supply behind it and having the optional 3 120mm fans at the bottom, there's no other value add, which I think is a big miss. Come on, NZXT. As for the rest of the cooling, so you can do a 420 at the front. I think that's a first for NZXT. You can do a 360 at the top and a 140mm fan mount at the rear. My only other complaint about the interior is that this whole section at the bottom is non-removable, so installing fans requires you to put the whole case down, and that's just so annoying. Now, as for cooling performance, the new H7 Flow definitely has potential, but maybe not with these stock fans. On the CPU side, for example, you can see it's not anything mind-blowing in terms of performance, and even adding 3 fans at the bottom for intake does not significantly improve our CPU temperature because we are using an air cooler, so the results will vary and it will improve for sure if you're using an AIO. However, on the GPU side, it seems like removing that traditional power supply shroud opens up more breathing room for our graphics card, and that's a really good result, especially when we add 3 additional fans at the bottom for intake that bring in a lot of fresh air, and I can actually feel it. The case is elevated perfectly enough to allow proper bottom intake. Now, you're probably thinking in the RTX 2060 my performance results, like that's probably not hot enough. So in the RTX 3080, you can see here the difference between having no fans at the bottom and having additional 3 fans. So the temperature delta is about the same as in my standard testing system. So there's definitely additional cooling in the tank when you're utilizing the bottom intake. So definitely don't be afraid to explore that space. Now, unfortunately, in the process of trying to simplify access to the interior, NZXT made sure that all exterior panels are toolless and just sit on pegs, and they're pretty strong. Unfortunately, you cannot secure them in any way, shape, or form. That might be a problem for this panel in particular if your cable management game is not strong, but luckily, this is easy to do. As for everything in this chamber behind the motherboard tray, it is very well laid out. So your I/O cables are neatly pre-routed, and we have Velcro straps in this channel and in this channel too, with additional metal sort of clips over here that you can use them to hold your thicker cables, the 24-pin stuff. This took me less than 30 seconds to do. I'm sure you can do a really good job in organizing all the stuff. As for storage, we have additional SSD caddy below over here in the front of the power supply, away from all the cables, and we also have this traditional storage bracket that can house 2 SSDs or 3.5-inch drives. The I/O remained the same, dual USB-A's, a USB-C combined audio jack, no reset switch, but a nice illuminated power button. As for the price conversation, I would say $129 is kind of steep, NZXT. $99 price point would be like that sweet spot that is somewhat competitive, because we have the NV5 that is better in some aspects. We have anything in the O11 series that roams around at 130 to 150 territory. Unless you're looking for that extreme minimalist aesthetic, the H7 Flow fits that criteria for sure, but they definitely missed the mark of trying to optimize that additional chin at the bottom of the enclosure for anything other than 3 fans at the bottom. Like no vertical GPU mount, no additional power supply mount, although that would create additional challenges with tooling perhaps, and maybe might not look as pretty as it does now with just a very clean rear. Gosh, that is a very weird thing to say. And it's weird, just like with the H6 Flow that was not flawless, it had some issues, but I still am pulled towards the new H7 Flow. I don't know why. I love maybe the aesthetic aspect of it and the whole ease of use and really easy cable management. Like they've really taken their time to build and optimize the rear chamber, because the interior chamber could have had slightly more work. So hoping for revision 2 sometime in the future, but otherwise let me know what you guys think of the new H7 Flow in the comments. I'm Dimitri, I'll talk to you in the next video.